Okay, let's just jump right in. Today we're unpacking the true timeline of King Josiah's reform. Now, if you know the story of King Josiah, you probably know him as the famous king who found a lost book of the Bible and completely transformed his nation. But as we really start digging into the historical records, it looks like the timeline we've always pictured might literally be entirely backward. So let's see what actually happened. Okay, let's dive into this. Because when you compare the historical accounts, a massive paradigm shift emerges. If you read the account in the Book of Kings, the narrative seems pretty straightforward, right? The workers are repairing the temple, they stumble upon the lost book of the law, Josiah reads it, realizes just how far his people have fallen, and then immediately kicks off this massive religious reform. But when we look at the parallel historical account in Second Chronicles, a completely different timeline emerges. According to Chronicles, radical, uncompromising obedience actually preceded the discovery of the text. He didn't start his reform because he found the book because he was already in the middle of an incredible reform. So, when we piece together the exact timeline recorded in Second Chronicles chapter 34, a totally different picture starts to form. At just 8 years old, he's crowned king of Judah. I mean, he's just a kid navigating a highly corrupt political landscape. But by age 16, he makes a deeply personal decision. He begins actively seeking the God of his ancestor David. And here's the real kicker. By age 20, which is a full 6 years before the temple repairs even begin, he starts actively purging his nation of idols and high places. He didn't need a newly discovered scroll to tell him that idol worship was wrong. His pure heart and desire for God drove him to clean house long before the temple doors were ever opened. And when I say he cleaned house, I literally mean it was an intense, unyielding purge. The text details exactly what this 20-year-old king did. He didn't just casually remove the altars of Baal, he completely smashed them. He decisively cut down the towering sun idols. And this is a massive geopolitical statement, by the way, because those sun idols were closely associated with appeasing the dominant overarching Assyrian Empire. He also took the traditional Canaanite Asherah poles, ground them into fine dust, and then scattered that dust right over the graves of those who had worshipped them. He was utterly desecrating the legacy of that false worship. Now, what's really interesting about this is a fascinating linguistic detail hidden in the original Hebrew text. When reading verse 5, a lot of translations say Josiah burned the bones of the priests on their altars. You might assume these were just regular, rogue Israelite priests. But the original Hebrew word here isn't kohen, which is the standard word for priest. It's chemarim. These were specifically idol-worshipping priests, officially appointed by past corrupt kings of Judah, strictly to burn incense to Baal, the sun, and the moon. Josiah dug up the bones of these chemarim and burned them right on top of the very altars where they used to lead people astray. It's just the ultimate irony, completely neutralizing their historical spiritual pollution. But as we read on into verse 6, a major geographical mystery suddenly pops up. The text tells us that Josiah expanded his aggressive reform into Manasseh, Ephraim, Simeon, and Naphtali. Wait a second, those regions belong to the northern kingdom of Israel. Josiah is the king of Judah, the southern kingdom. So how on earth did a southern king just casually march into northern territory to smash their idols without triggering a massive international incident? Well, to solve that mystery, we really have to look at the geopolitical landscape of the ancient Near East at that exact moment. For almost a century prior, the northern kingdom of Israel had been completely conquered and was strictly controlled by the mighty Assyrian Empire. Under normal circumstances, stepping foot into those northern territories would mean declaring war on the greatest superpower on Earth. But during Josiah's reign, the geopolitical tectonic plates completely shifted. The last great powerful Assyrian king, Ashurbanipal, suddenly died. The Assyrian Empire began rapidly collapsing from the inside out, which created a massive power vacuum in the region. And Josiah stepped into this exact window of opportunity perfectly. But here is what makes Josiah so unique compared to other leaders of his time. Pretty much any other ancient king would have used this massive power vacuum to send in a ruthless army, conquer the territory, and expand his borders by force. But Josiah didn't do that. His expansion into the north was a spiritual invitation, not a military conquest. You see, when the Assyrians originally conquered the north, they deported the wealthy and the skilled, but they left the poor farmers behind. Josiah reached out to these forgotten people. He went into their ruined cities, smashed the remnants of their oppressive idols, and extended an invitation to return to the pure faith of Elijah and their ancestors. Let's see how this all builds, because this momentum toward national unity is absolutely incredible. Step 1 was purging the land of idols. Step 2 was uniting the deeply fractured North and South spiritually under one God. Now, because these northern tribes were so deeply moved by this spiritual invitation, we reach step 3. They actually began gathering offerings. So when Josiah finally decided to repair the temple in his 18th year as king, which is step 4, the project was funded not just by Judah, but by the financial contributions of the people from Manasseh, Ephraim, and all the remnant of Israel. They traveled all the way down to Jerusalem, bringing their offerings to restore the house of the Lord together. And that brings us to the absolute climax of this incredible historical account. It is right here, during these unified, historically unprecedented temple renovations funded by a newly reunited people, that the Book of the Law is finally discovered in the rubble. Think about the profound beauty of this sequence for a second. God didn't use the book to force a rebellious king into compliance. No, God responded to a young king's years of faithful, voluntary, and unified obedience by blessing him with the ultimate reward, the actual written words of the covenant. The discovery wasn't the catalyst. It was God's seal of approval on a reform that was already changing the world. And yet look at Josiah's reaction when the book is finally read to him. Even though he was already living in remarkable obedience, and even though he had already smashed the idols and united the kingdom, hearing the pure, unadulterated words of the law book caused him to weep and tear his clothes in repentance. He realized that no matter how much they had cleaned up, they still fell short of God's perfect standard. Actually, scratch that. This humility didn't stop his reform. It deepened it. It led Josiah to gather all the elders and the people to forge a lifelong, unshakable covenant with God that lasted for the rest of his days. So the crucial point is, how did this ancient history translate to us right now? We might look at Josiah smashing stone statues and chopping down Asherah poles and think, well, I don't have any towering Assyrian sun gods in my backyard, so I'm good. But this source material really challenges us to look deeper. We all harbor hidden, modern idols in our hearts today. What are they? Well, they're our tendency to rely entirely on our own abilities and intellect instead of God. They are our endless chase for the comforts, wealth, and approvals of the world. Simply put, an idol is loving anything more than God's rightful place in our lives. Just like Josiah, these hidden idols need to be ruthlessly dragged out, smashed, and ground into dust so they absolutely no longer have power over us. The story of Josiah isn't just a timeline correction. It is a profound invitation. Josiah didn't wait to have all the answers or a perfectly clear instruction manual before he started seeking God and clearing out the garbage in his life. He just started with a pure desire, and God met him there with a profound revelation. So the ultimate question for us to ponder is this: are you willing to tear your heart today? Are you willing to proactively clear out the modern idols in your life so that you too can hear the words of God anew with a fresh, completely transformed heart? Think about that as you reflect on this incredible history. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I'll catch you next time.